Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today we're diving into, well, what's really become a high-stakes national war over election maps. It's a battle that could fundamentally reshape American politics.
Yeah, it's really heating up. On one side, you've got former President Trump pushing hard for new maps that favor Republicans in states like Texas, Missouri, Ohio.
Right, he's been pretty open about it, saying a simple redrawing in Texas alone could swing, what, 5 more seats to his party?
Exactly. But what's really turning heads, I think, is California, a state that often positions itself as a leader in democratic reform. Well, now Governor Gavin Newsom is openly floating this really controversial idea. He wants to redraw California's congressional districts specifically to help Democrats for the 2026 to 2030 elections.
Okay, wait. He wants his party to draw the maps after California specifically set up an independent system.
That's the proposal. Now, he says the independent commission system would come back in 2030, but yeah, it's a direct challenge to the system voters themselves put in place.
And his reasoning, he's framing this as like a necessary response.
Pretty much. He calls it an existential threat from Trump and other Republicans. He even posted on X, formerly Twitter, saying, two can play that game.
Yeah.
Basically fighting fire with fire.
So it really brings up this fundamental question. What if the lines defining your voice, your vote, were drawn not by, impartial citizens, but by politicians fighting for power?
That's exactly the fight we're seeing unfold. So our mission today is to take a deep dive into the California Citizens Redistricting Commission, the CCRC.
Okay.
We'll look at where it came from, how it's supposed to work, its actual track record, and crucially, this major political challenge it's facing right now.
Right. So by the end, you listening should have a really clear grasp of what's at stake here and, frankly, how it affects your vote.
Definitely.
So to really get the CCRC, we need to step back first. Look at the problem it was meant to solve, gerrymandering. We know redistricting happens every 10 years after the census, right? Just redrawing lines because populations shift.
Standard process.
But gerrymandering, that turns this necessary process into something, well, kind of insidious, doesn't it? Can you break that down quickly?
Absolutely. Gerrymandering is basically manipulating those district boundaries to give one political party, or maybe another group, an unfair advantage.
How do they do it?
There are two main tricks. First is packing. That's where you cram as many of the opposition party's voters as possible into just a few districts.
So they win those districts by huge margins, but their votes don't count anywhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Their votes are sort of wasted in those packed districts. The flip side is cracking.
Okay.
With cracking, you take the opposition voters and spread them out thinly across many districts so they don't have enough numbers to form a majority in most of them. It just dilutes their power.
Got it. And California, before the CCRC, had a bit of a reputation for this, right?
Oh, absolutely. A famously contentious history. Back in the 80s and 90s, when the state legislature drew the maps, it was described as highly contentious and tortuous. It almost always resulted in maps designed to protect the incumbents.
And the 2000 cycle really highlights that, doesn't it? This so-called incumbent protection plan.
Yeah, that was basically a gentleman's agreement between the parties and the legislature.
And the result? Over 10 years, 255 congressional elections. How many seats actually change party control?
Just one.
One seat out of 255 races. That's staggering. It basically locked everything in place no matter how people voted.
It really did. It created these incredibly safe districts for incumbents from both parties. And, that led to massive public frustration. People felt their votes just didn't matter.
Understandably. So there was this real push for change. I know they tried other reforms before, right? Like involving judges.
They did. Several ballot propositions tried different approaches, but they all failed.
Yeah.
There was clearly this hunger for something completely different, something that would actually take the power away from the politicians.
And the idea for California's commission, it actually came from a neighbor.
That's right. Arizona pioneered a citizen-led commission back in 2000. California looked at that and saw a model that could work, proving that independent redistricting was possible, even though it was, challenging.
So that inspiration led to the actual propositions here.
Exactly. Two key ones. First, Proposition 11 in 2008, that was the Voters First Act. It set up the CCRC to draw the lines for the state Senate, state assembly, and the Board of Equalization.
And it had some big backers, didn't it?
It did. People like Cathay Feng from California Common Cause, even then, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger supported it. Broad support.
Okay, so that handled state districts, then came Congress.
Right. 2 years later, in 2010, Proposition 20 passed. That was the voters' first act for Congress. It gave the CCRC the job of drawing the U.S. congressional districts, too. Charles Munger Jr. was a big force behind that one.
So Prop 11 and Prop 20 together created this fully independent, citizen-led commission. The whole point being to get politicians out of the map drawing room. But how do you actually pick these independent citizens? That sounds like it could get political really fast.
Well, they designed a pretty rigorous process to try and prevent that. The commission has 14 members, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, the 2 largest parties, and then 4 members who are registered as no party preference or with another party.
Okay, so a mix. And they serve for 10 years.
10-year terms, yeah. And the selection is run by the California State Auditor. It's meant to be open, fair, impartial. Starts with outreach across the state. Then there's an applicant review panel that screens people. They look for impartiality, analytical skills. There are supplemental applications, financial disclosures, background checks. It's thorough.
It sounds very thorough. But don't legislative leaders get any say? Can't they block people they don't like?
They have a limited role. They can strike a small number of semifinalists. It's more of a safeguard against someone truly unsuitable slipping through, not really a tool for partisan control. They used, I think, 24 strikes total in both 2010 and 2020.
Okay, plummet.
And here's a key part. The first 8 commissioners are actually chosen by random lottery drawing from the qualified pool.
Randomly.
Randomly. And those 8 then select the final 6 members, specifically aiming for diversity in terms of geography, race, gender, expertise, etc.
Huh. That's interesting. And there are rules about commissioners being involved in politics before or after, right?
Big ones. There's a long list of political activities and positions they're barred from for 10 years before they even apply, and then for 5 to 10 years after they serve. It's a serious commitment to independence.
Okay, that definitely seems designed to keep politics at bay. So once they have the maps drawn, how are they approved? Is it just a simple majority?
No, it's much tougher than that. Final approval requires a special supermajority. At least 9 of the 14 commissioners have to vote yes.
9 out of 14?
And crucially, that 9 has to include at least 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 3 of the independent or other party members.
So you have to get buy-in from across the political spectrum. It forces consensus.
Exactly. It's designed to prevent one group steamrolling the others and ensures the final maps have broad acceptance. It's vital for perceived fairness.
That makes sense. So, okay, they've got this diverse independent group. They have this high bar for approval. What rules do they actually follow when drawing the lines? What are the criteria?
They follow a strict, rank-ordered list of criteria that's actually written into the California Constitution. It's not optional.
Rank-ordered, meaning some things are more important than others?
Yes. Number 1, absolutely non-negotiable. Population equality. That's the one person, one vote principle from the U.S. Constitution. Districts have to have, as close as practically possible, the same number of people.
Okay, fair numbers first. What's number 2?
Compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act. This is crucial. It ensures that minority groups have an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. You can't draw lines that dilute their voting power unfairly.
Right, so those are the big legal requirements. Then what?
Then it moves into geographic principles. Third is geographical contiguity. All parts of a district have to be physically connected. You can't have weird, separate islands of voters belonging to the same district.
Makes sense. No jumping over neighborhoods. What about keeping communities intact? That seems like a big one for gerrymandering victims.
That's number 4, geographic integrity. This is a huge focus. It means minimizing the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and something called communities of interest.
Communities of interest. What does that mean exactly?
It's defined as a contiguous population sharing common social and economic interests. Think of maybe a specific cultural neighborhood or an area heavily reliant on one industry, or maybe a school district boundary that people feel strongly about. The commission holds hearings specifically to identify these communities.
So they actively try not to split those groups up.
Correct. Then, number 5, where practical, is geographic compactness. Districts shouldn't look like, a bizarre Rorschach test bypassing nearby areas to grab voters far away. They should be reasonably compact.
Where practical, okay.
Yeah. And finally, number 6, again, where practical, is nesting. This means trying to draw state Senate districts so they're made up of 2 whole assembly districts and Board of Equalization districts made of 10 whole Senate districts. It helps create some logical structure.
That's a very detailed list. But just as important is what they are not allowed to consider, right? Where the political temptation might creep in.
Absolutely critical. The commission is explicitly forbidden from considering where incumbents or political candidates live.
Okay, no drawing lines to protect or hurt specific politicians.
None. And they cannot consider the partisan registration or voting history of the people in the district unless it's absolutely necessary to comply with the Voting Rights Act.
So no drawing maps to guarantee a certain party wins?
Nope. There's also no requirement to try and make districts more politically competitive or even to pay attention to where the old district lines were. The focus is meant to be on the criteria, on the people, not the politics or the past.
And this whole process, it happens out in the open.
Completely. Transparency is mandated. The CCRC has to conduct an open process, lots of public hearings, actively soliciting input. In the 2020 cycle, even with the pandemic, they managed remote and hybrid meetings.
And didn't they have some new tech for public input last time?
They did. It was actually a first for any state redistricting program. They had an online map drawing tool where any member of the public could draw and submit their own proposed maps or define their community of interest.
Wow, so people could really get hands-on.
Yeah, it allowed for a huge amount of citizen engagement.
Okay, so the system sounds impressive on paper. Independent, transparent, strict criteria. How has it actually performed in practice? What's the track record over its 2 cycles?
Well, overall, it's generally seen as a success, though not without challenges. The 2010 cycle was the first real test. It was pioneering the first time an independent citizen group tackled redistricting in a state this huge and diverse.
And they got it done quickly.
Remarkably quickly. They had to build the whole operation from scratch, staff, procedures, everything, and they certified the maps within 7 months.
But I bet those maps got challenged immediately. Politicians who lost safe seats couldn't have been happy.
You bet. They faced 4 different lawsuits and even a statewide voter referendum trying to overturn the maps.
And the outcome?
The maps are upheld in every single case. The California Supreme Court ruled unanimously for the commission 3 times. That's a pretty strong endorsement. Plus, the U.S. Department of Justice approved the maps under the Voting Rights Act.
So legally validated, did they actually lead to more competitive elections like they were supposed to?
Yes, studies showed they did. Independent analyses by groups like the Public Policy Institute of California, National Journal, Ballotpedia concluded the 2010 maps created some of the most competitive districts in the entire country.
A big change from that 1 seat in 255 situation before.
A massive change. It led to some incumbents actually deciding not to run again, and more races between members of the same party, especially in the primaries. It definitely shook things up.
Now, wasn't there some controversy around influence attempts even in that first cycle?
There was. ProPublica did an investigation suggesting some Democratic Party leaders had sort of coordinated with community groups to try and influence the testimony and map proposals presented to the commission. The CCRC responded saying, yeah, they were aware of organized efforts but felt they weren't unduly influenced and stuck to the criteria. But it highlights the constant pressure these commissions can face.
Okay, so a successful, if slightly bumpy, first run. Then came the 2020 cycle. That must have been incredibly difficult with the pandemic and the census delays.
Hugely difficult. COVID forced almost everything online or hybrid. And the census data, the population numbers they absolutely need to start drawing maps, was delayed by an unprecedented 134 days.
134 days. That throws the whole timeline off.
Completely. The commission actually had to go to the California Supreme Court to get a one-time extension on their deadlines.
But they managed it, despite all that.
They did. They adapted, held tons of virtual meetings, used that online mapping tool extensively, and certified the final maps just before the extended deadline, December 26, 2021.
And what about legal challenges this time?
This is maybe the most impressive part. The 2020 maps faced 0 legal challenges. None.
0. After all the fights in 2010.
0. Which saved the state, estimates are, over $5 million in legal defense costs alone. And the final vote by the commissioners to approve the maps, it was unanimous, 14-0. Far exceeding that supermajority requirement.
Unanimous approval and no lawsuits. That sounds like a pretty strong validation of the process.
It really does. And constitutionally, the CCRC's standing was also implicitly boosted by a 2015 U.S. Supreme Court decision that upheld Arizona's very similar commission.
Okay, so we have this commission, born from public frustration, designed for independence, legally tested, proven to work even under extreme difficulty, producing maps with unanimous bipartisan support and no legal fights last cycle.
Right.
Which makes Governor Newsom's current proposal seem even more, well, jarring. Let's unpack that. He wants to ditch the CCRC maps just for the next few election cycles.
That's the plan floated in fall 2025. Replace the maps drawn by the Independent Commission with a new set drawn specifically to favor Democrats, effective for the 2026, 2028, and 2030 elections. Then, supposedly, revert back to the CCRC system in 2030 for the next cycle.
And the justification is basically a political retaliation against Republicans in other states.
That's the stated rationale. He's directly pointing to Trump's efforts in Texas and elsewhere, saying two can play that game. He frames it as responding to an existential threat and needing an essential offensive posture to, fight fire with fire and help Democrats win back the House.
Are other Democrats on board with this fight fire with fire idea?
Some are, yes. They see it as a necessary, if maybe unpleasant, tactic in what's become a national political arms race over redistricting.
But what about the actual voters in California, the ones who voted twice to create this independent commission? How are they reacting?
That's where this gets really interesting. The polling is pretty stark. A recent survey, end of July, early August 2025, shows 64% of California voters want to keep the independent commission.
64%. That's a solid majority.
It is. Only 36% favor giving the power back to the legislature, even temporarily. And here's the fascinating part. That includes 61% of Democrats surveyed.
Wow, so even Democrats prefer the independent commission over a potential short-term gain for their own party.
Seems so. The poll analysis pointed to a significant mistrust in politicians across the board. People fought to get politicians out of this process, and they don't seem eager to let them back in, regardless of party.
So, massive public opposition, even within his own party. What are the other big criticisms being leveled against this plan?
There are several major ones. First, critics say it just flat out undermines the law, Proposition 11 and 12 that the voters passed. Some argue it might even violate the governor's oath to uphold state law.
And ethically. Even some Democrats seem uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable. There's a real concern, voiced even within the party, that this risks legitimizing the race to the bottom of gerrymandering. If California does it, how can they criticize other states for doing the same thing? The optics are, as some put it, horrendous and indefensible politicians taking power back from citizens.
Yeah, the hypocrisy charge seems hard to avoid. What about legally? Can he even do this easily? It's based on voter propositions, maybe even the state constitution.
It would be incredibly difficult legally. He can't just snap his fingers. It would likely mean either trying to argue the existing law doesn't apply or, more likely, trying to pass a new constitutional amendment through a potentially rushed special election.
Which would definitely face lawsuits.
Inevitable lawsuits,
Yeah.
as commentators have noted. It would be a huge legal battle. And even if, as some conservative outlets have suggested, maybe the state Supreme Court might be sympathetic, it's still a massive uphill legal and political climb.
And is the potential political payoff even worth that fight? You mentioned the current maps are already pretty good for Democrats.
That's another key point experts raise. This whole brazen political gamble, as some call it, is maybe aimed at squeezing out an extra 5 to 7 Democratic seats. But analysts point out the current CCRC maps already lean Democratic overall in California.
So potentially risking public trust, fighting legal battles, undermining a voter-approved reform, all for maybe a handful of seats that might not even materialize.
That's the calculation or miscalculation critics point to. Does the potential gain really outweigh the significant political cost and the damage to the principle of independent redistricting?
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We're basically watching this clash between a system, the CCRC, that seems to be working as intended, independent, transparent, publicly supported, and this raw political impulse to gain partisan advantage, especially in this charged national environment.
Yeah, the tension is palpable. This fight in California really crystallizes a fundamental question for American democracy right now. Who should draw the lines? Should it be independent citizens focused on fairness and community representation, following clear rules?
Or should it be political players whose main goal is, frankly, securing power for their party, potentially overriding what voters explicitly asked for?
Exactly. It's about that balance between democratic ideals and, well, hardball political strategy.
It really makes you think, will the public's very clear preference here for fair, independent processes win out? Or are we watching the start of a race to the bottom on gerrymandering that could reshape how your voice is represented or maybe silenced for years to come?
That's the question hanging over California and potentially the whole country. It's definitely something to keep a close eye on.